Can you hear my kids yelling at each other? Hold on. They're fighting over the new puppy. Oh my God, I think I might have to go. I'm going to put the phone down for a moment.
Pistols, prayer, and potluck. This is Armed Lutheran Radio.
Hi folks, welcome to Armed Lutheran Radio. I'm your host, Lloyd Bailey, the Armed Lutheran, and this is episode number 247. This is a show about guns, hunting, competitive shooting, the natural right of self-defense, and what God's Word says about the issues surrounding gun rights and gun ownership. Thank you so much for making Armed Lutheran Radio a part of your week again this week. For those of you who are new to the show, thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope you will stick around. This is the last show of 2020. Well, it's the last variety show of 2020. We'll be hearing from Sergeant Bill Sylvia, Mia Anstein, and Pastor John Bennett in just a moment. But first, I want to thank the members of the Reformation Gun Club. This week, I want to give a shout out to our seminarian, Jim from Fort Wayne, Stephen B., Kurt from Rialto, California, Derek from Huntsville, Alabama, Gordon, and our newest member, Vincent from Tulare, California. Thank you so much for your support. Armed Lutheran Radio is listener funded. And that means we don't have any sponsors. We don't have any advertising. We rely on the generosity of the members of the Reformation Gun Club to keep doing what we do. Thank you all so much for your support. Today is as I mentioned, is the final variety show episode of 2020. If you are new to the show, what we do is we alternate our format from one week to the next. We have a variety show with tips and rants and information, content from our entire cast, Sergeant Bill Sylvia, Mia Anstein, and Pastor John Bennett. And then we alternate with what we call our Clinging to God and Guns show with myself and Pastor John Bennett. That was last week. Today is the variety show, and it is the last one of 2020. We're closing out 2020. It's almost over, folks. So we've got, Mia was unable to be here today, so we have a classic motivation from her. We have a new ballistic minute from Sergeant Bill and a new pontification from the pastor. I am currently taking some much-needed vacation. Haven't done that in a while. Getting things ready for 2021. For my part today, I'd like to do I don't really have a tip, but I do have a few little housekeeping things I want to do before I turn it over to the cast. First, for my friends in Georgia, I just want to say, get out and vote. Joe Biden was campaigning for those two Marxist lunatics in Georgia recently, Ossoff and Warnock, and he said, you need to get out and you need to vote like your life depends on it, which is just insane. Never in American history has your life literally depended on your vote. If whether you live or die depends on the results of an election, then we don't have a free country anymore. Biden is just a fool, a doddering old fool, who is probably going to stroke out within 6 months of taking office. So just keep that in mind, whatever he says. But anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent for a moment. Vote like the Second Amendment depends on it, is what I would say, because it does. A Biden administration with Democrat control of the House and the Senate, and Harry Reid having already set the precedent for basically rewriting all the rules, means that we're going to see gun control legislation like never before. And you can sit here and say, well, but we've got the Supreme Court stacked. Yeah, that's great. But here's the problem. If they pass this legislation and it goes into effect, it goes into effect. It starts to take effect immediately, or whenever they set the date for it. You have to go to court to overturn it. Just because a law or some legislation is unconstitutional doesn't mean they can't pass it. Doesn't mean it can't go into effect and start affecting your life. It has to be litigated in the Supreme Court. Somebody has to go to court to stop it. So they can attack the Second Amendment in lots of different ways. And let's face it, Obama and Trump set a lot of precedent when it comes to executive orders. So we're going to see an attack on the Second Amendment, like I said, like we've never seen. So we absolutely need the Senate. Biden and his side chick have basically already made it clear that this is what they're going to do. And despite Biden's mouth words about unity, there are members of his campaign and other ranking Democrats who have also been making it clear that they have no interest in compromise. They have no interest in kumbaya. It's going to be payback time. And anybody who supported Trump or his policies or who weren't sufficiently opposing Trump's policies will be vilified and declared an enemy. So we absolutely have to vote like the future of the Second Amendment depends on it, because those two goobers in Georgia are insane Marxist lunatics who have no business being in the Senate. The Senate needs to be a bulwark against the excesses of the corrupt, crazy, anti-Trump left, who are probably going to be in power come January 20th. And we cannot afford to lose it. And anybody on the right who is suggesting that you should not vote in protest against the outcome of the general election is a moron. Get out and vote. Okay, now, second thing. We've got 2 more shows this year for you. I know I said this was the last show. It's the last variety show. We do have 2 more shows for you. Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, we are releasing remixed and remastered versions of our Christmas specials. The Real Story of Christmas and They Saw the Same Star Rising. I took them, I remastered them, I remixed them, I added new soundtrack. And so listen for those 2 shows, one on Christmas Eve at 6 p.m. Central and one on Christmas Day at 6 a.m. Central. I think you will enjoy those. Gather the family around the, I started to say radio. Gather the family around the iPhone, I guess, and share those episodes with them. I hope you will enjoy them. Then next Sunday, December 27th, there will not be a new episode of Armed Lutheran Radio. We're going to take the week off and celebrate the new year and kind of recharge the batteries and get ready for 2021. And then come Sunday after that, December 3rd, we will have a live show, our first live episode of Armed Lutheran Radio. We are going to be celebrating our 250th show. And so that'll be December 3rd, the evening of December 3rd. So mark your calendars. Do people still do that? Do they still, I don't know why I said that. Do people still mark calendars? I'm showing my age. Set a reminder on your iPhone or whatever. Okay. One last thing. I want to encourage you, if you have not done so, I mentioned this earlier with the shout outs. If you have not done so previously, consider joining the Reformation Gun Club in 2021. We've got an awesome group of people who support this show. It is a really great community from all over the country, all different walks of life. And we have some fun things planned for 2021. We have monthly online hangouts that we do that are really fun, where we get to we sit down and we chat with members of the cast, and we get to interact with members of the gun club. Those are fun, and we're going to be doing that and more in 2021. And we have some, we have some things planned in 2021 that we were hoping to do in 2020 until COVID hit, and hopefully we can get back to those plans in 2021. And you can help make all that stuff happen and get some cool perks by becoming a member for just $1 a month. I mean, come on. I bet you can find $1 under the cushions of your couch, right? I mean, do people still lose cash in the cushions of their couches? I mean, they used to. I'm showing my age again. Do people still carry cash? I don't know. Anyway, look under the cushions. You'll probably find some money there, or in your car in that little console thing between the seats. There's probably enough there to cover a membership. So sign up today. Check out the Reformation Gun Club at armedlutheran.us/gun club, or look for a link in the show notes for this or any of our previous episodes, and come join us in 2021. We would love to see you there. Okay, it's time to turn the show over for the last time to my awesome cast, the final time of 2020. Merry Christmas to all of you. Happy New Year. Enjoy the rest of the show.
Time now for Mia's Motivations with Mia Anstein.
Hey everybody, I have been out in the woods. I've been pursuing elk, and now I'm pursuing black bear. When out in the field pursuing bear, there are times that you might get into some pretty tight spots. Sometimes you may be crawling through or simply sitting near some thick brush or shrubs, and these are areas where bears may be. This is an event that I wanted to share with you because I carry my sidearm with me in these times, and it's different than the type of carry that we often discuss. When I am hunting, I don't necessarily carry concealed because I am out in the woods and there's really nobody to hide the firearm from. Sometimes it gets pretty chilly out there, and so you start to pack on a lot of layers, which actually will help in concealing our carry guns.
Ogres have layers. Onions have layers. You get it. We both have layers.
They stink?
Yes. No.
Oh, they make you cry?
No.
Oh, you leave them out in the sun, they get all brown, start sprouting little white hairs.
No. Layers.
But it also adds to the bulk of clothing that you have to burrow through in order to draw your weapon if you're in a sticky situation. Just like when we're carrying every day, we absolutely have to practice drawing our firearms. When I'm maneuvering through brush or tight situations in the woods, I make sure that my jacket and other layers aren't binding or hindering access to my holster or my ability to draw my handgun. Always think of where you're carrying your firearm on your body. How are you going to access it? And just like in these bear tunnels and thick brush, you might be in a very tight situation. Actually, you probably will be in a very tight situation if you find the need to draw your firearm. Because if you're not in a tight situation, then your better option is probably to find a way out of that situation. Get out your layers, get out your holsters, and start dry firing and practicing that draw. Cheers to you from the woods, and you all be safe out there.
You can read more from Mia, watch her YouTube videos, or check out her podcast, Mac Outdoors with Mia and Leah, at miaanstein.com. Time now for another Ballistic Minute with Sergeant Bill Sylvia.
Hey everybody, I'm Sergeant Bill, and this is your Ballistic Minute. Today I want to talk to you about backup guns. So, coming up here in another 6 months or so, I'll have hit 20 years in law enforcement. And throughout all those 20 years, I've carried a backup gun. Now, a backup gun is a secondary gun that you carry just in case your primary gun gets taken from you. Now, I've heard a lot of people on online forums, and I've had a few people ask me about it, so this is why I'm talking about this today, as to whether concealed carriers should carry a backup gun. And I told them no. Cops carry them, in case someone tries to take their primary gun. If I'm wrestling with somebody who's trying to go for my gun because I'm a police officer carrying open carry, basically, then yeah, I would like to have a backup gun. So just in case I have something else to go to. It's not there because something's going to go wrong with my gun and I need a second gun. It's there in case my first gun gets taken from me. So to me, it's kind of obvious. Concealed carry, you're concealed carrying a gun. Now, open carry is a whole different story. I think it's kind of ridiculous unless you're on your own property, you're out hunting or something like that, where there's not a lot of people. You're not going to run into many people at all. But we're talking concealed carry. It's right there in the name. It's concealed. Your gun should be concealed. It should be concealed well enough that when you're out in public, people don't know you have a gun. I mean, that's the basic definition of concealed, right? So there really isn't a reason to have a secondary or backup gun, because your primary gun shouldn't get taken because no one should know you have it. Now, I've heard the argument, people say that, they want a second gun in case their primary gun has malfunctions. That's ridiculous. If your primary concealed carry gun, it should be good enough that only a spare mag is needed, might be needed. Magazine issues are a common thing with just about any gun. So carrying a backup magazine is a good idea. So instead of trying to strip the round out of a magazine and reload the ammo or whatever it may be, you just drop it, grab another magazine, get back in the fight. But your primary concealed carry gun should be vetted enough. And by vetted, I mean you need to have it out to the range. You need to shoot it. You need to shoot it from concealment. You need to put lots of rounds through it, the rounds you carry as well, so that you know it's going to work. There's no issues with it. There's no, well, it works most of the time. Most of the time's no good. For a carry gun that you're depending your life on, it's not good enough. Chuck it, get something better. Now, your primary gun should also get the maintenance that it deserves so it doesn't become an issue that affects the reliability. Clean it, take care of it, oil it, replace the springs when necessary. Do what you need to do to make sure that gun that you are counting your life on, that tool is well taken care of, so it'll take care of you. Now, the other argument that I've heard that I actually find quite ridiculous, but it's we'll talk about it, is someone says, well, what if you need to hand off a gun for additional help to someone who doesn't have a gun? My first question is, why in the world would you hand a gun to someone who's out in a life and death situation who didn't bring their own? Do you really want to trust them with it? Do you want to give them that power? Do you know whether they have the ability to use it? They know how to use it? You don't. So it's ridiculous. Having a backup gun to hand off to somebody is just ridiculous. I look at it this way. If you don't think it's your responsibility enough to have your own gun on you to carry, to protect yourself, why should I bring one for you? I'll be more than happy to protect you, but I'm not giving you a gun not knowing whether you know how to use it or not. Possibly putting myself in jeopardy from your mismanagement and poor handling. So I guess if you think you need a backup gun, you need to reevaluate all those things we've already talked about. The only people I think really need a backup gun are someone who's open carrying, mostly in a law enforcement or military capacity. And most of the time, they don't need it. My backup gun at work has seen nothing but the range in my locker. I haven't once even reached for it or even really needed it. So get a good gun, get some good training, start practicing, learn how to take care of it, and learn how to carry concealed properly. And you won't need a backup gun. I'm Sergeant Bill. This has been your Ballistic Minute.
Sergeant Bill Sylvia is a veteran of the Dallas Police Force and a masterclass competitive shooter. You can check out his YouTube videos at armedlutheran.us/Sergeant Bill. It's time for Pastoral Pontifications with Pastor John Bennett.
Hello folks, welcome to another installment of Pastoral Pontifications. This is the Pistol Packing Padre, Pastor John Bennett, and for today's episode, I would like to dispel some of the stupid myths that we hear this time of year concerning Christmas. Now, some of these myths, they are perpetuated by well-intentioned but ill-informed people, and we can also say the opposite is true, that some of these myths are perpetuated by the ill-intentioned and frankly uncouth masses that wish to try and discredit the Christian faith. So as you have probably already heard by this time of year that, the Christian celebration of the birth of Christ, well, that was just a rehashing of an old ancient pagan Roman religion and a pagan Roman holiday. Well, that's not exactly true. You see, there are references, historical references within early Christendom that are dated well before the establishment of Sol Invictus, the festival of the unconquered sun. And these references established December 25th as an accurate date for the birth of Christ. There's also the ridiculous myth that the date for Christmas, Christ's birth, was set to coincide with Saturnalia, the festival of the Roman god of agriculture. Now, unfortunately, for those who buy into that garbage myth, Saturnalia isn't even on December 25th. So how do we know whether or not Christ was born on December 25th? Now, I will preface this by saying that from a broader perspective, whether or not Christ was born on December 25th is inconsequential to our faith and to our salvation. But when we are faced with antagonism from secularists and others who wish to try and discredit the Christian faith, it's good to have some sort of knowledge to defend this dating of December 25th as the celebration of the birth of Christ, that this is indeed a Christian holiday. And all other holidays that coincide with this time of year have been put in place to try and supplant the Christian faith. The only exception that I would give would be Hanukkah, since Hanukkah is a remembrance of a miraculous event that took place before the birth of Christ. So we're not going to downplay that festival at all. But everything else, you have Kwanzaa, you have Saturnalia, and other pagan festivals. These all were put in place after the birth of Christ, and in my opinion, in an effort to supplant and discredit the Christian celebration of Christ's birth. So, do we know whether or not Christ was born on December 25th? And the truth is that there is evidence within the scriptures, as well as within some historical documents, that indicate for us that this is perhaps a very accurate dating for the birth of Christ. And first, let's take a look at the scriptural evidence. First, let's look at Luke chapter 1. Starting with verse 8, so it was that while he, that is Zechariah, was serving as priest before God in the order of his division, according to the custom of his priesthood, his lot fell to burn incense when he went into the temple of the Lord. And this is when, of course, the angel appeared to Zechariah to tell him that his wife Elizabeth would bear a child. We're also told here in Luke chapter 1 that Zechariah was of the order of Abijah. If you look back in the Old Testament, there were 24 divisions of the priesthood that were set up, and each division would operate during different times of the year. They would go from Sabbath to Sabbath, and basically serving for a week at a time, and there was this constant rotation. Now, what's interesting about what Luke writes here is that Luke specifies that this happened when lots were cast and Zechariah was selected by the casting of lots to offer an offering of incense. Now, why I find that peculiar is because there was a daily offering of incense, so it wouldn't have been spectacular in any way if a priest was offering incense on any particular day. But what is an indicator here for us that helps us to narrow down the date a bit, and of course, we can't say this concretely as fact, but we see that it is implied by the text, is that Zechariah, the angel, would have appeared to him in private. And so when were lots cast to select someone to burn incense? That it most particularly happened on the Day of Atonement. So the question is then, Did this happen on the Day of Atonement? Can we prove that Zechariah was on service with his division of the priesthood, the division of Abijah? Were they on service during this time? Well, first of all, Yom Kippur, that falls on the 10th day of the month of Tishrei. Now, keep in mind that the Jewish calendar is a movable calendar based on the phases of the moon. And if you go online, if you do a little search of the year 1 BC, when the 10th day of the month of Tishrei would have been, it would have been on the 25th of September, according to our calendar. We also know from historical record that when the temple was destroyed, they have a record of which division of the priesthood was on duty, and I won't bore you with all the extraneous details, but they have determined, historians that are far wiser and more learned than I am, have determined that indeed that Zechariah and the division of Abijah would have been on duty during that time, the tail end of September towards the first week of October, that would have been the period when he would have been on duty. So we can narrow things down that the angel appeared to Zechariah between the end of September and the beginning of October. We can narrow it down to roughly about a 2-week span of period. Now, moving along, how do we know then that this has anything to do with the dating of the birth of Christ? Well, now we take a look at continuing on in Luke chapter 1, verse 26. Now, in the 6th month, the angel Gabriel was sent by God to a city of Galilee named Nazareth to a virgin betrothed to a man whose name was Joseph of the house of David. The virgin's name was Mary. Then the angel said to her, "Do not be afraid, Mary, for you have found favor with God. And behold, you will conceive in your womb and bring forth a son, and shall call his name Jesus." And now verse 36, "Indeed, Elizabeth, your relative, has also conceived a son in her old age, and this is now the 6th month for who was called barren." So if we can extrapolate from the details given earlier in the chapter, that most likely Zechariah was on service in the temple between the end of September and the beginning of October. And if we want to go with that date of the Day of Atonement, though we cannot say with 100% certainty that was the exact day, that Day of Atonement being September 25th, if you go 6 months from there, you get to March 25th, the day that the angel Gabriel announced to the Virgin Mary that she would bear in her womb the Son of God, the Savior of the world. And of course, 9 months from there, you land on December 25th of the year 1 AD. Now, of course, you can take into account the fact that they realized several years, I shouldn't say several years, a few centuries after the fact that Christ was most likely born, roughly around the year 4 BC. Then that would place the date of the birth of Christ right around New Year's Day. So really, in the grand scheme of things, yes, we can say that December 25th is indeed an accurate estimation of when Christ was born. One other myth that I would like to dispel in the few minutes that I have with you, and this is one that came courtesy to me of one of my church members who had asked me. She was listening to some television preacher or some radio preacher, she didn't specify which, who had said something to the effect that when the wise men came to worship Jesus, that, well, he was by that time a toddler, that he would be about 2 years old, and so it took place well after the birth of Christ. Well, not only does this defy logic and reason, but this is something for which there is no scriptural support. Now, granted, there are many who take a look at the account given in Matthew's gospel that because Herod, he went and had all the baby boys in Bethlehem killed from the age of 2 and under. Well, then obviously Jesus must have been 2 years old. But it doesn't tell us that in the text. The only thing that we are told is that Herod asked the wise men when the star had appeared. They gave him an answer, which the scriptures do not reveal to us. And then afterwards, Herod orders all the baby boys killed 2 years and under. Now, even though we do not know what the wise men would have answered, the truth is Herod was indeed a very evil and paranoid individual. He even had one of his own sons killed, as well as one of his wives, because he saw them as a threat to his throne. There's also some speculation historically that he was mentally ill. And indeed, what kind of person would you have to be but mentally ill and or evil to order the murder of baby boys? So Herod, he orders the baby boys killed, and my opinion, this is, of course, not biblical truth because it does not say concretely in the scriptures, but I believe Herod, being paranoid as he was, overestimated the age of the boy and ordered all toddlers 2 and under that were boys to be murdered. Now here's why this idea that Jesus was a toddler when the wise men came, why it defies all logic. Joseph and Mary, they were from the town of Nazareth, a town that was roughly 70 miles away from Bethlehem. They had made a very difficult journey to Bethlehem. Now, of course, as most fables go, that Mary rode on a donkey, but again, we do not know that because the scriptures do not say it. It is quite possible that she, being very pregnant, would have made that trip on foot. Of course, that would have been terrible, but again, we do not know. Either way, they get to Bethlehem. Mary gives birth to this baby boy, the Son of God, the Savior of the world, and there were no family that we are told of in Bethlehem. They were from a town many miles away. Granted, for us, a 70-mile trip is no big deal. We can make that in a little more than an hour by car. But even traveling on a beast of burden, it would have been a very difficult and lengthy trip that took several days. If you had just given birth to a child, would you have wanted to stay in a town far away from family, far away from anyone to give you assistance, far away from any place where you might have been able to live and stay and have proper lodging? I would think no. I would think that if you having a child would want to return home as soon as possible in order to be with your family who could provide all the kinds of support that one would need. So on its face, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense practically why Mary and Joseph would have stayed in Bethlehem. Now, another aspect to consider in this as well. We do not know when the star appeared. The wise men knew, of course, because they were the ones who have followed it, but there is no documentation of when that star had appeared. But here's what we do know. If we look at the prophecies concerning the wise men from Psalm 72 and Isaiah 60, we have a rough indication of the regions that the wise men most likely would have come from. And based on the distance, the trip would have been made in roughly a month's time. So if the star appeared when Christ was born, they would have arrived roughly a month after that in order to worship the Christ child. The star easily could have arrived before Christ was born. Our God, in his almighty power, could have caused the star to appear before the birth of Christ in order that the wise men would travel and arrive in Bethlehem shortly thereafter. Either way, again, it's not really consequential to our faith. It doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things pertaining to our salvation. It's just a point of interest for me. So for myself, I believe the wise men have visited Christ when he was a month old or less. And that, of course, is based on some of the hints that we find within Matthew's gospel, as well as the prophecies concerning the visit of the wise men. So there you have it. There's some of the historical and scriptural details concerning both the date of Christ's birth, as well as the rough dating of the visit of the wise men, that indeed these things most likely took place within the time period that we normally celebrate the Christmas and Epiphany seasons. So if anyone tries to tell you this Christmas season or any other year that, well, the celebration of Christmas is just a rehashing of some Roman pagan religion, you can set them straight with the information that you've heard in this segment. Well, to all of you, I wish you a very blessed Christmas, a very blessed New Year, and may 2021 be a much better year than 2020. Christ's blessings to you all.
John Bennett is the pastor at St. John's Lutheran Church in Willow Creek, Minnesota. For more information, visit stjohnswillowcreek.org. For show notes, be sure to visit our website at www.armedlutheran.us. Check out the Facebook page, The Armed Lutheran, or join our Facebook group, Fans of Armed Lutheran Radio. If you like what you hear, please leave us a comment on our feedback page at armedlutheran.us/feedback or a review on iTunes and let us know what you think. Thank you for listening to Armed Lutheran Radio, a member of the Self-Defense Radio Network.